Let's talk about this. Growing up, the imagery of the inside of the Earth's core never made sense to me. Like, they really expected me to believe this. But when I got older and discovered the deepest hole that was ever dug was only a few miles deep, I was flabbergasted. Like, they just make up a lot of information and imagery. Like, this crap is not even confirmed. And I've heard stories of machinery refusing to operate past a certain point. What's that about? In the end, I choose to reject these little cartoons here. They make absolutely zero sense and only feed the purpose of indoctrination. I mean, think about it. They lie to us about everything else. So why wouldn't they lie to us about this too? This is a lazy explanation of what the inside of a globe would possibly look like. Someone really just didn't want to do any homework.
Yo, you guys hear the news? We're finally going back to the moon.
What do you mean back?
Don't you know your history? We went to the moon in 1969, not 1970, but the year before.
How do you know?
Because I seen it on TV.
So you believe everything you see on TV?
I mean, it was all over the news. They even live streamed it.
I want you to reflect on what you just said.
Do you really believe that in 1969 we had the technology to live stream the entire moon landing? Absolutely. The video signal was transmitted from the lunar module's antenna system to a receiver in Australia. Then it was sent to a comm satellite back down to Houston.
You still believe in Santa, don't you?
I find it very interesting that they had the ability to landline the White House from the moon. But yet here in 2023, my cell phone still loses service in the back of Target.
That call must have cost a fortune.
Look, NASA used to have the technology, but they destroyed it.
And yet KFC has the 23 herbs and spice recipe locked in a vault to this day. But NASA somehow forgot how to get to the moon.
It's the same reason why we don't have the tech to make the Model T car anymore. It's useless. I'm pretty sure if we really wanted to remake the Model T, we can find an engineer to slap one together. Same goes for the Apollo missions.
The truth is, we can't get past the firmament, aka the Van Allen belt.
Look, I'm not buying into this moon landing as a hoax and flat earth conspiracy BS. You two are ridiculous.
Space may be the final frontier, but it's made in a Hollywood basement.
Globy McGlobeface has no clue how a sundial works, yet he tries to explain it and debunk flat earth based on his misunderstanding. So many things wrong, but we'll just start with the fact that he believes the shadow should be on the north side of the sundial at 7 a.m., which is not true in the southern hemisphere.
Another uneducated, indoctrinated globetard here who doesn't understand that in a court of law, it doesn't really matter the details on why you lose, you lost. He's referring to Georgia State Court, Flurfs versus Globetards. And the Globetards lost. Okay, it doesn't matter why you lost, but I'm going to go and explain why you lost. The reason why you lost is because you weren't able to even come out and do your own little experiment on a local lake like this. This is Lake Conroe, 21 miles. I've already done this experiment, okay? Lake Conroe, out of Houston, Texas. You can Google it. It's 21 miles long. It's missing 288 foot of curve. I've done this experiment with a telescope. Look from one side to the other. Okay. And it didn't have it had zero curve. Missing 288 foot. I don't know why globetards always say, oh, prove it to me, prove it to me. Why don't you go out and do your own experiments and prove it to us that there is a curve? You know why you can't and why nobody does? Because there is no curve. You can't come out and do a simple experiment of a 20-mile lake and prove that there is 288 foot of curve. You just can't do it. You know why? Because there is no curve. When are y'all going to start coming out and doing experiments, and when are y'all going to prove to us that there's a curve? Because the only proof y'all have is NASA showing you a picture from the moon of the blue marble. Globetards. You gotta lie to be a globetard. Just gonna say that.
You do not live on a spinning ball covered in water. Centrifugal force is the opposite to what you think. Water doesn't stick to spinning objects, especially one that curves in every direction. It doesn't matter how you spin water, the centrifugal force will push it away. I mean, it's basic science. How do you think a washing machine removes the water from your clothes? You're supposed to be on a ball spinning 1,000 miles per hour, orbiting the sun at 66,000 miles per hour while shooting through the galaxy at 500,000 miles per hour. That's also moving at 1.2 million miles per hour. Yet none of those speeds match anything we experience in reality. In fact, it's completely insane to suggest such a notion. Bodies of water always find an equilibrium. When they're at rest, the surface is completely flat. It's time to realize the math ain't mathing and the science ain't sciencing. You can't even make it make sense. You're not a random mutated monkey man living on an accidental rocket bowl, so follow and bind your mind to find out where you really live.
So let's talk about this. The direction of star trails in the north and southern hemispheres completely destroys flat Earth. Let's talk about that. So I have a picture of my dad right there. He passed away, but look in this globe how his image is flipped upside down inside of this globe, right? Whenever it's in a globe. Now watch this. I didn't have a magnifying glass, but watch this lion. It's a curved glass. And what happens is, just like the firmament, it gets flipped upside down around the edges. You see how it's flipping? Just like the water in the firmament is flipping, that's the same thing that's happening inside of the firmament in the northern and southern hemispheres. It just flips. That's all. That's why they go left and right. The North Star does not move. I'll say it again. The North Star does not move. It flips because of the water in the firmament made out of frozen oxygen.
Sup guys, just going for a bit of biblical flat earth in the King James Bible. So, what does the Bible in the original translation teach what the stars are? So Genesis 1:14, and God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days and years. So we know that lights in the firmament originally translating as rakia, solid expanse, means, lights in the firmament. This is referring to our sun and moon. Quite simple. And let them to be used to divide the day from the night. This is what the sun and moon is. And let them be for signs. What it's talking about is when we look up at the sky, we're able to use this information as signs. You know, we're able to look at the sky and read it. Not worship it, but we can read it. That's why it says signs. Because you see, the upper cosmology is like a big clock. Let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days and years. This is God's creation, and the firmament above, with its lights and skies and everything, is God's clock. It's God's calendar. It's God's life. It's for signs. It's for seasons.
You've dropped this, my friends. I would have to say I disagree with you 100% that the Earth is a spinning ball, and don't think you comprehend. And just because you fail to see the value doesn't mean it is a false hope, okay? It breaks my heart to see such utter failure in the thought concepts of humanity. This is why I got this t-shirt. I walk around and I wear it because I understand everything is an illusion. But the truth is, we are born into this illusion. We are all doing the best we can do at the level of awareness we are at. This illusion is being controlled. And if we want the freedom we seek, we must save our sons and daughters by teaching them the inner works of this matrix so they are intellectually superior and intelligent enough to create the right solution for the future of mankind, and all of the life on Earth for that matter. There is way too much we don't know. We don't know what we don't know, and that must be respected. For without an open mind, you will never know what you don't know. I am sorry you don't see things the way I do, but you're low energy and low hope and disagreement with solutions because you don't know what you do not know is what I am looking for on my posts. If you see my posts and do not want to share them or add value to them, I think you should leave them and not be on any of my pages or networks. Just go simply be happy. Alright?
So you think Galileo used this little wooden, homemade stick for a telescope to discover other worlds? First of all, I want you to ask yourself a few questions. Do we even know if this thing up here works? Can you even bring it into focus? Let's assume for a minute that you can actually bring this telescope into focus. Let's look at the specs on this stick telescope, shall we? It supposedly had a 1330 millimeter focal length, which I highly doubt, with a tiny little 26 millimeter aperture. For those of you who aren't familiar with telescopes, when it comes to magnification, aperture is king. So with this small little aperture, even at 1330 millimeter focal length, the magnification would be pathetically weak. In fact, its maximum magnification is only 14x. Most of today's smartphones can blow that out of the water. And in fact, this article says his initial version could only magnify 8 times. 8 times, guys. But don't worry, it was soon refined to go as far as 20 times magnification. And again, even if it could go to 20x, most smartphones today could still surpass this with zoom. And I want you to take notice, these up here, that's Galileo's drawings of the moon. Because obviously back then they didn't have digital cameras. They had no way of, photographing or documenting his discoveries. So he had to draw them and write them down. And that's assuming that Galileo actually even existed. I mean, we're taking their word for this. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's say Galileo did exist. Let's say he did repurpose the telescope for observing celestial bodies. A lot of people think that Galileo invented the telescope, but he didn't. He just repurposed it for observing the night sky. Before this little wooden stick down here was used to look at stars, it was called a spyglass. They would use them on ships and, from the tops of walls or castles, stuff like that. But one of the biggest problems with these telescopes here is they had an extremely narrow field of view. Just look at this exit pupil here. That's probably smaller than the eraser on a pencil. So he was literally looking at about that much of the sky with this thing, if that. So I showed you his drawing of the moon. Now let's look at his drawings of the moons of Jupiter. It's funny, don't those look an awful lot like stars and not moons? As many of you are well aware, I've been telling you guys for over 2 years now, Jupiter, Saturn, all of the wandering stars, they do not have moons. Those are little stars that appear to orbit them or to be nearby them. They are not moons, guys. They try to tell us that Galileo observed Jupiter's moons. Well, there's no possible way that he could have thought those were moons with that little homemade rink-a-dink telescope. And his depictions are evidence of that. Those are 5-point stars up here, and this drawing down beneath it, those are obviously stars as well. If he really thought he was looking at moons, why not just draw 4 little circles here? And 4 little circles around the circle at the bottom. See, he drew Jupiter as a circle. If those were moons dancing around Jupiter, why didn't he just draw little circles? Why did Galileo draw stars? And in fact, in this article and in many other articles I've read, it says that his observations of the planet Jupiter over successive nights revealed 4 star-like objects in a line with it. But later on, he had to correct himself and he changed his findings and inferred that these objects must be moons. But I'm guessing what really happened is his handlers or the elites or the men in power at that time who were really pushing out this heliosexual model were like, no, dude, you can't tell people those are stars. We're trying to convince them that that's another world up there, so those have to be moons. So you got to change your findings from stars to moons so that it'll fit the narrative. And I believe that's exactly how it went down. Another very, very suspect finding of Galileo's is supposedly the phases of Venus. And the reason I say it's suspect is because with that small of an aperture and that short of a focal length, there's simply no way he could have observed the phases of Venus, because he simply didn't have enough magnification to resolve Venus that well. The most he could have saw is a bright light, a bright star-like object. Even when observing Jupiter at only 14 or 20 times magnification, it just looks like any other bright star in the sky. And I can prove this. I'm about to show you what 20 times magnification looks like when observing Jupiter. And you tell me if Galileo really thought he saw another world or just a bright celestial body. Here you go. This right here is a raw photograph of Jupiter and all these surrounding stars, which they claim are moons. They try to tell us that Jupiter has 79 moons, guys. In order to believe this, you would have to be out of your mind. Why on earth would it have 79 moons? But anyways, this is close to what Galileo would have observed when looking through that little homemade rink-a-dink stick telescope. All he would have saw is a bright star-like object surrounded by smaller star-like objects. There's no way he could have saw Jupiter clear enough or close enough to make the claim that it was another world, or let alone that it had 4 or 5 moons orbiting around it. Now let me show you what Mars would have looked like through Galileo's stick telescope. Only he wouldn't have had near this wide of a field of view. His field of view would have been about this right here with that little telescope. This was captured with my smallest telescope, my little Red Cat 51 refractor telescope, and I think this is like 25x. That's what Mars looks like at 25 times magnification, guys. It looks just like a bright orange star, similar to Antares or Arcturus or, another orange alpha star in the sky. Now this is another photo of Mars taken with one of my bigger telescopes at its lowest possible magnification setting. This is 40 times magnification here. This is Mars as it was passing through what they call the Beehive cluster. It's this really beautiful, tight little cluster of stars right here. And I think that this photo speaks volumes. For instance, they say the Beehive cluster is like 1,000 or 2,000 light years away, something like that. But Mars here is only around 200 or 300 million miles away. But these stars around it, they tell us, are trillions upon trillions upon trillions of miles away, further than Mars here. I don't know about you, but all these stars look like they're about the same distance. Mars is just a little bigger and a little brighter than all the rest.
The flat Earth map dates back over 1,000 years. This map is credited to being created by a Persian astronomer, Al-Biruni, who lived between 975 AD to 1048 AD. It's the official map of the United Nations and also the United States Geological Survey. It used to be present in many places before the creation of NASA and the Antarctic Treaty in 1959. Here you see it with Admiral Byrd. This map has been restored by Dmitry from Russia with suggestions of mine, Eddie Alenkar. Known by my YouTube channel Flat Earth Banjo, I asked Dmitry to include the Bermuda Triangle and Point Nemo, a place deep in the Pacific where NASA buries rockets. Then Robert Tozzi, a professional mapmaker, came along and enhanced the map even more. There are many people now selling this map online, but I would greatly appreciate if you can order it from my store. I humbly thank you.